Hello and welcome to this video where I will talk about the British company Imperial Typewriters and demonstrate a couple of their typewriters. It started with a man named Hidalgo Moya, a Spanish-American who would move to England. He was an inventor and a violin maker, but in his younger years he worked for Remington in the States and he was sent to England for work. Some records seem to indicate that he also worked for Hammond Typewriters at some point. The story goes that he met with a man named John Gordon Chataway, who took an interest in Hidalgo. The same can be said for Chataway's daughter Sophia, who would end up marrying Hidalgo. Financially backed by John Chataway, Moya designed, created and sold his first Voya Visible from the company created by himself and Chataway in 1902 under the name Moya Typewriters. It did not go well. Having identified some problems, he very soon completed an improved version, the Moya Visible 2. It too did not sell well, despite being fairly reasonably priced for its time. Sadly, the same could also be said for the Moya Visible 3. They were not ready to give up just yet, but further improvement needed more investors to support in the venture. In 1908, the sale and purchase of Moya typewriters to include new investors renamed the company to Imperial Typewriter. Investors Joseph Wallace Goddard and William Arthur Evans joined into the venture. The future of the company was bright, but as with any who put their money into a venture, they wanted to make sure it goes well. Both the new investors wanted a say in the future of the company and the direction the technology went. There were certain demands and criteria that came with the investment. Britain was not a country ripe with genius typewriter designers, so one of the demands was that an outside expert had to be hired. For this, they managed to convince Swedish-born engineer Erik Julius Pilblad to join the company in 1911. Another engineer who actually was British, Arthur Pateman, had already worked with Moya's company before leaving to do other things. He returned to work the tool room of their new factory in 1909, but joined Hidalgo in the experimental department in 1910 to work on the Model A. In 1911, Imperial Typewriters started selling their Model A. Sadly for Moya and Chataway, the investors would take more and more control of the company as development of the machine progressed, and by the launch of the Model A in 1911, they had more or less taken complete control. The Model B that came later was very similar to the Model A, and seeing how my machine is a B, I'll allow myself to start using that for my video feed a bit early. Better that than more low-res pictures, right? As one of the things that would become the hallmark of the Imperial machines, the keyboard, key levers, segments and type arms were all mounted together as a single unit that could be released from the machine by unlocking two levers. This meant that you could buy one typewriter and two typing sections with different keyboard layouts, for example. For companies that dealt with international trade, for example, this was a big benefit. It meant they didn't have to buy separate typewriters for their needs. They could just buy several of the cores. This was likely an attempt to compete with typewriters such as Hammond, which had metal plates with letters engraved on them into a cylinder to type. These plates could be swapped out and effectively would change the typeface of the typewriter, sort of like a very early IBM Selectric with its type ball. Changing this did however not change the keyboard. That was a benefit to the Imperial. The Model A wasn't exactly a smash hit, but sold better, much better, than the Moya Visible. Creating and selling around 8,000 units between 1911 and 1915, it showed that the company was definitely on the right track. Moya, in team with Pilblad and Pateman, improved upon key features of the model, and in 1915 the Model B was released. They also made a Model C. The Model C is however super rare, and I have yet to even see a picture of it. Its existence is only known from the records that state it was offered. It was the same machine but made with aluminium. This would have made the machine lighter, increasing its portability, but also insanely increasing its price, as aluminium was quite expensive at the time. The Model B based itself very strongly on the Model A's design, but refined certain details in the design and increased the general quality of the materials used. It, like the A, was a fairly small typewriter, While Imperial considered the machine a portable, it would have been a cumbersome travel companion. It was attached to a wooden plate, which you could easily unscrew, and came with a thin metal crate that boxed around the machine. The crate did have a handle, and it did attach to the wooden plate, so you could lift everything with you. But the crate as a whole was still tall, bulky, and was easily dented if you bumped into anything. It may have been portable in theory, but in reality it was likely not that practical. There wasn't many who had made typewriters portable yet, so in terms of competition, it didn't do that bad. The early Imperials were downstrike machines, meaning the type arms moved down and hit the platen from above. It allowed you to see what you were typing, but you would have to sit quite close and kind of perched over the type arms to see over the type arm arc and down to the platen. Most machines around this time were designing their machines to be front strike now, and it would take around 15 years for Imperial to join in on this design choice. With the launch of the Model B in 1915, Hidalgo withdrew from Imperial and left the company, though still a major shareholder. He had already listed himself as a violin maker in 1914, but apparently kept himself updated on how Imperial's business went. In 1920, for health reasons, he moved to California with his family, but shortly after the birth of his son Jack that same year, and once again a year later, Hidalgo suffered strokes, which left him paralyzed on half his side. He survived, but returned to England because, according to his doctor, how badly the company was doing without him stressed him out. He would live on another 7 years until he died 63 years old in Bournemouth, 1927. Back in Leicester, Imperial Typewriter kept at it. After Hidalgo left the company, Pierre Blas took over as general manager, and they continued working on the design. In 1919, Imperial announced they were making the Model D, which would be released in 1921. In addition to the Model D, Imperial also released the Imperial Portable, which was very much the same as the D, only short a few keys and features. With the Model D, Imperial continued the vision of having interchangeable keyboards and segments, but now the keyboard was no longer curved. 2 years later, Pierre Blas quit the company and went on to do different things. Pateman would succeed him and be Imperial's lead inventor all the way until his retirement in 1960. Around this time, that is the mid-20s, King George V visited a technology fair where companies presented their inventions and products. Also at the fair was Imperial's head of sales at the time, Norman William Reginald Mall, aka Bill Mall. At the fair, Mall told the king about how Imperial had just supplied 900 machines to the Swedish government. At the same time, he could inform the king that around a whopping 1,200 American machines were being shipped into Britain on a weekly basis. This would spark an outrage in the king, who would start a campaign to urge British people to buy British products. As part of this campaign, Imperial was appointed by King George V as the Royal Typewriter manufacturer. With the royal appointment secured, in 1926 Imperial released a new and improved standard, the Imperial 50. It was considerably larger in size than before, and while they had completely dropped the general design by Moya, they kept his initial idea of making the key levers and segments interchangeable. The machine was a big success. Not perhaps comparable to that of Underwood or Remington, but nobody could deny the sturdiness and efficiency of the Model 50. I don't have a Model 50 myself. I do have a Model 55, which I will be using for demonstration. It is basically the same machine anyway. As stated, its design that allowed for interchangeable keyboard and segments meant it became super easy to service. You just flip down 2 levers on the front of the typewriter, and the entire course slides right out on a set of rails. The carriage was also made to lift right off the top of the machine by just opening 2 locks on the sides, and the platen could be popped right out, not a single screw needed unscrewing. It made it extremely easy to gain access to the inner workings of the machine, to service and to clean it. This ease of service may not have mattered much to people at home, but to businesses it would have been a cost-saving feature. People looking for a typewriter for their home usually would not look for a standard such as this model anyway. And for that, they would usually look to portable typewriters, something Imperial didn't offer just yet, but that was soon to change. The design of the 50 was so practical and accomplished that very little changed in the machines as time went on. Certain features were added here and there, as well as how the shell would have been designed and given updates and redesigns. But even as the model names went from 50, 55, 58, 60, 65, 66, and Doppelganger, very little changed with the internal core of the machine. Not long after they launched the Model 50, focus shifted somewhat to plug a hole in their product line that had yet to be properly filled, namely portables. Their Model D portable was, compared to other products on the market, outdated and impractical, and Imperial had by now also realized that front strike was the way to go. Imperial looked into several options, but in the end would buy the license to produce the Torpedo Model 14 as their own. They would also hire a British engineer who used to work with the Model 14 at Torpedo's factories. With him on the team, Imperial would base their future good companion models on that Model 14. With this license and plan in place, in 1932, Imperial launched their Good Companion. It had a robust design, was superbly engineered, and was very elegant looking. This meant British people could now buy British to their homes, or even to a smaller business that perhaps didn't need a full-sized standard. In 1960, Pateman retired after serving Imperial for just over 50 years. 2 years later, Imperial launched its Model 70. It would be the first not designed with Pateman as lead designer, and was the first to no longer support a removable core. Just some years later, in 1966, Imperial was acquired by Lytton Industries, who gradually would have the factory start producing Royal typewriters instead of Imperial's designs, though the machines would still bear the name Imperial. Under the rule of Lytton Industries, a lot of cheap labor from immigrants was brought in. They weren't paid well, and were usually overlooked whenever bonuses and promotions would be relevant. When the company fired a good portion of their immigrant workers in 1974, a strike broke out where the foreign workers at Imperial, in large part South Asian, protested heavily. A good portion of their workers promptly walked out of the factory, starting demonstrations against how they were treated. Despite not being supported by neither the Shop Stewards Committee, which was an employed union representative at the workplace, nor the union itself. As the strike went on, more and more of the striking employees were fired. For 14 weeks, they kept it going until they no longer could. And shortly after the strike ended, Lytton announced it would be closing Imperial's door. A year later, in 1975, they did, both in Leicester and Hull. While a sad ending to a long history of British innovation and production, Imperial made some very interesting and nice machines. To me, the Imperial Model B and Model 55 in my collection are both machines I find fascinating and beautiful. The Model B is truly beautiful with its intricate and yet simple design in chromed parts that make it look almost like some steampunk kind of machinery. The Model 55 is not just a great typer. Its 40s design feels very right for its time, particularly with the decals in the spool lids that somehow remind me of the Keep Calm and Carry On posters. Everything about it makes me think of Britain, not to mention how much I love its ease of serviceability. Neither of them are the best I have in terms of typing action or feeling, but they are very nice, and they are super interesting machines that I would hate to see go from my collection. If you come across a chance to get a hold of one of these, I can only highly recommend it. Before I say goodbye, I feel the need to send a shout out to Robert Messenger from Australia for his blog Oz Typewriter. When researching Imperial for this video, just about every question or piece of information I searched for would bring me to his blog. If you found this interesting, make sure you take a look at the links to his blog in the descriptions, where you can read even more about the various engineers that designed Imperial's machines, as well as other things the engineers set out to do in their times after Imperial. And with that, we've come to the end. I hope you've enjoyed this hike through history as much as I did in researching it. Stay happy and stay typing.